Welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. Today we're working on the Dodge Dakota, and I was lucky enough that partway through the week my brother Jeremy and Caleb, his son, showed up to help me try and knock out some of the work on this. We got I don't know if we got 3 days worth of work done in a day and a half, because we had a huge thunderstorm, knocked out the power for probably 8 to 10 hours, so we lost part of that day and all the way into the evening late. But we did get a lot of this rear suspension done. We've got the last two components designed. I'll get those put in the next day or two. And then that's where this video will end, with the whole suspension working, cycling, and you guys getting to see that. So I want to introduce, you already know Caleb, but I want to introduce Jeremy and his truck, his project. We're just trying to take care of it. So this is my brother Jeremy. You probably can't tell because we don't look anything alike. And you guys remember Caleb. So what we did was get in here and just work like fools on a lot of this. We got our front cross member built. We got tubing in here to back that up, and I'll do a little walk around so you guys can see it a little closer. What do you guys think? What was it? How hard was it? Was it like working for a living?
It is like working for a living. It's a lot more work than I think most people realize. I know you do it because you love it and it's fun, and it is fun. But make no mistake, there is work happening here.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So when we first started talking about the project, and hey, we're just going to convert from leaf springs to some kind of multi-link suspension, we talked about it like it was going to happen in a couple of days, or at least that was my perspective. And I can see now that that's not the case. You would have to have a full team to make something like that happen. But there's so much thought and then effort and trial and error to get it right that it's honestly, it's humbling to see somebody that knows what they're doing, and it still takes all that time. So I do love the result, though. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. So like one of the things that we made this tubular cross member, and it's out of 1x3, 125 wall rectangular tubing, and I don't have dies to bend these 90s or anything and keep it from creasing up. So our plan was we were just going to cut slots in it once and then fold the edges in. And so I showed the two of them, this is how we're going to do it. And they're like, okay, that makes sense. And they got started, and they asked me, how long will that take? I'm like, I don't know. It could take a full day, day and a half, something like that. We were last night still trying to finish this thing, a full day and a half of working on one guy working on a cross member essentially full-time for a day and a half. It's so much work to do that pie slicing method and then weld everything back up, and then we had to, section corners and stuff to make it fit. But a lot of this stuff happens on video in 30 seconds. Some of this stuff takes days to accomplish. So we were talking about it last night. We made these final braces that go under here to catch the front of this third arm link here. And, I still have to drill the mounting holes, but it didn't take us 15 minutes to design them. We cut out one practice one. We're like, let's tweak it a little bit. Cut out another one. Then we wanted to reverse the AC that's in there on one side so that it would be visible from both sides. It makes sense. But if it wasn't for a plasma table, we would have been days making something like this, or at least hours making something like this. And not everybody has a plasma table or even has access to one. And there are places online that we all know about now that you can go and design something up and get them to make it and send it to you, but you're going to get it a week from now or 2 weeks from now. I have a lot of tools that make some of this really effortless, but there's so much time in that, and that's one of the things everybody learns when you come work in a shop and you're like, holy crud, how long does this actually take to do? And these guys did a whole lot of the work. I mean, they put in a lot of this tubing. Caleb was under here welding, and first time welding upside down. He's like, what's the method? Don't be underneath the slag when he gets there. And he still learned that the hard way. And Caleb's becoming a pretty good welder. I mean, it's getting better and better. He needs more practice, but we're getting that. Jeremy was doing some welding, and one of the welders I actually bought from him like 15 years ago. And he's like, yeah, that was the last time I welded, was 15 years ago on that machine. So, so it took some getting used to and, you know, getting your skills back. So, Jeremy, tell us, what is your plan? I told him what I thought the plan was for the truck. What is your plan for the truck? Long term, short term, what would your eventual, like if you budget was unlimited, what would your goal be?
Budget unlimited, I might not have started with this truck. However, we own the truck. Caleb's sister, my daughter, used this truck for high school, and that's what it was purchased for. And it's always been a super fun truck. A little V8, standard cab, short bed. It runs really well. Now that she's gone and driving something else, there are, in the South Texas area where I'm at, there are coffee and cars mornings every weekend somewhere close. And just looking for something to do, a hobby where I can maybe go and participate in these coffee and cars and talk about something I love to do, but also participate. And so that was the initial thought, is that I wanted to fix it up and start participating in those events. And then in talking to Jeffrey, he's like, well, you know, if you just send it to me, we can do X, Y, and Z and a whole lot more. And so that's the short-term goal. As we've talked about suspension design and what's possible, I've kind of thought about maybe dipping my toe in like this pro touring or maybe the SCCA parking lot, you know, skills racing kind of a scene. And so we're designing the rear suspension with that in mind, so that my short-term goal was that it would ride better than the terrible ride that these came with. In doing that, it's adjustable. We can raise and lower it. We can do some adjustments that would maybe benefit it on the track versus the street. So I am going to try that and see if that's for me. But if nothing else, we'll have a cool truck that sits a little bit lower, that runs good, and is something to talk about, and that I'm very proud of, because my son and my brother have put blood, sweat, and tears into it. And
it was all his blood.
That mainly his blood. My burns, but his blood. But, you know, just have something that's meaningful to me and that we can play with.
Yeah.
But I'm not so wrapped up in that I can't walk away from it either.
Of course, you guys remember Caleb from the red truck, and he'll be back, and we're going to work on that some more eventually. And we're getting there. The motor's back and on that. But so that's the motivation for the suspension change. And then you're thinking, going to put a Positrack of some sort in it. It's a one-legger right now, but it's got a heavy-duty axle in here. We're not lacking for beef, I guess, you know, for...
Right, it should be. It's certainly stout enough for what's powering it right now. Going to get a limited slip in the rear. We're going to do a four-wheel, well, a rear disc brake conversion, and we're going to convert it to 5 lugs, front and back, of course. And so it'll get 13-inch rear rotors. It'll get 14-inch front rotors. That's something that I'm able to take on.
Yeah, and you guys got to see he has... And I think I put some pictures in one of the videos, and if I haven't, I'll try and stick them in this video. He has gone through the process of figuring out how to redo the spindles and getting somebody to machine out spindles that would use a Mustang hub, and then he's figured out what he needs to put Mustang front calipers on it, and he's really done a lot of sciencey math stuff to figure this out, and to the point where he's also figured out, this is what I want to use for the rear brake conversion. He's got a guy who's making that kit, but he's kind of making it based off of your design, if I understood correctly.
He's got his own design, but his design keeps the 6 lug. And so in talking to him, we figured out that there are components out there, again, if you do the math, that we can change the rear axles and use his kit and convert it to 5 lug Mustang hardware, front and back. And so I believe he's updating his kit, so he has options available for buyers. And for me, I'm getting a 5 lug conversion, which is what I want, because there are almost no wheels available for these trucks, and certainly not for the size of rubber that we want to run.
And you guys have seen the tires. And then from that, so we'll have four-wheel disc brakes, good size brakes. We're going to have Positrack in the rear at some point. And then he has got like 9 sites bookmarked, sending him updates like, do you need an update on, hey, what engine is available today used out of, and you found a 6.2 liter?
6.1 liter is what we're looking at right now, an Chrysler SRT8 6.1 liter Hemi. They used them for a few years. It's not the current in vogue engine, but it's absolutely bulletproof. We have a line on one of those, and so that's where we're leaning right now.
So there you go, guys. That's maybe a more long-term goal. Whether it would get that motor here or whether I would fly out to Houston and help him figure it out or something. But there's the truck. I'll do a walk around here in a minute and show you the suspension and point out a few of the details. But these guys got to get on the road. They have to make a 2.5-hour drive, swap out a car, get into the airport, and head back, because they all have jobs that don't involve hanging out in the shop on every day of the week. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for flying out. It was awesome working with you guys. You guys will get a little bit of video on that. It's just so hard to video a lot of the stuff, and we were all kind of doing 3 different things. So I got a little bit of video, but I didn't get a lot. That's the reason we'll do some of this walk around. But we're going to get them on the highway, and we'll see you guys next week on Allison Customs Project Car TV. Please like and subscribe. Hit all the other YouTube stuff. See you next time.
Bye.
I'm back on the 2002 Dodge Dakota, working on the rear end, setting it up for a 3-link suspension using these Detroit Speed Engineering links. These are the ones with the swivel, so that there's a little bit of give in the twisting of the suspension and you're not relying strictly on just the bushings, although it does have pretty good bushings in it. So and they're rubber, so they will give some. Anyway, these are going to go on here. I had originally thought about trying to use this front leaf spring mount, but it was giving me a little too much up angle on the bars. We really want these bars to be parallel to the ground, at least to start with our tuning. And I mean suspension tuning. So because of that, I have designed some mounts to go on the front. So we're going to be taking these front leaf spring mounts off. The new mounts will be just a little bit forward of those so we can use the full 24-inch length of these bars. And really from eyelet to eyelet, it's a little longer than that. I think it's almost 26 inches or something. No, I'm wrong. 24.5. So 24.5 inches eyelet to eyelet. So we were going to have to cut off a little bit to use these, and it was going to get the angle just off a little bit. Now, as part of this, I did make sure my truck is level. So I opened the door, set a level on the rocker panel. Once that's level, that's where I'm going to work from for the whole rest of the suspension, including figuring out what length shocks to use on the front ends. We want everything to be level. So we've got that. We've got our links. Those are, you buy them, it's easy. All right, and here are the brackets we're going to be using. So this is the one for the front mount, and it's made out of 1/4 inch. It's overkill. It's confidently done out of 3/16. In fact, you could make the back plate, this one, out of 1/8 inch, and then just maybe make the front side out of 3/16. But I had 1/4 inch plate already on the table, so that's what I made them out of. I made it the width of the bushing plus about 1/8 of an inch, so that as it cools off, it's going to squeeze back together. We'll gusset on the back side, or well, really the front side. So that's going to go in here somewhere. Axle side mount is just a basic U with a 9/16 hole. It's very simplistic. Keeps it fairly close to the axle housing. We're going to be putting those on here. Working off the other side, I know that this front side bracket, or the outside portion of the bracket, needs to be 7 inches from the back side of the drum housing face, whatever you want to call that, backing plate. So that's where that's going to go. And again, the width of the bushing plus about 1/8 of an inch. Those are the spacers. And then we've got two of these brackets, and I bolted them together so that I could get this opening opened up for the axle housing. It's got a weird size axle housing. It's like 3.55 inches or something. These are from QA1. They're the shock mounts. They give us a lot of places to mount the shocks. But they only come in the largest at 3.25 inches, so got to open those up. So that's what that's been done. I beveled the edges so we can weld those on. They're going to go vertical off the back of the axle. The way I like to mount these is if you could hang this perfectly centered under the bottom of the axle, it would be, look aesthetically correct and all that. Doesn't really matter. They can be shifted back a little bit. The only thing you worry about there is if you shift them back very far, then the bar may hit the axle tube before the suspension would actually bottom out. So what I like to do is shift them forward just a little bit and then put a level on this side, and when that's level, that's where I tack them on, and they're forward of the center of the axle just slightly, but it's easier to figure out where they go rather than trying to get them under there just perfect and try and get that all lined up, because you might get one, but you're probably not going to get them both, and probably more likely you're going to be forward on one and backwards on the other. And so with everything level, it's just a little easier to put a level on there, tack that off. So those are all the pieces we're using. We're going to be welding those on. We got to get this bracket out of the way. I've already knocked the heads off of the rivets, and I did that with just a chisel on my air gun because there's the brake lines here, so I can't really get cutoff wheels in here. So it takes a little while longer to chisel, but it did just fine. I've taken the fuel tank out, and fuel lines are right here, so we want to be careful of those, not to nick them or tear them up or melt them because they're just plastic. It's metal up to about here, and then it switches to a plastic line, so I'm going to try and take care of all that. But anyway, we're going to knock this plate off. What I learned in doing the other side is these 4 rivets also go through both plates of the frame, connecting the frame together. So we're going to take them out. Once we start taking the rivets out, we're going to take them out one at a time and put a 7/16 inch bolt through the hole. It fits almost perfectly. And we'll get 3 of those in. One of them down here on the front bottom side is actually going to need to have a matching hole drilled through our bracket here to line up with it, and then the bolt will go through both pieces. So learned that doing the other one. And then there's a few holes in the frame that once those are out of the way, we can actually kind of weld the frame pieces together as well as weld this bracket onto the frame, and we're all set. So we got to get this bracket off. We use our air hammer, punch on the rivets a little bit. We should be able to get that bracket out of the way, and then we'll take the air chisel and knock the heads of the rivets off again. Well, that's one bracket done, out of the way. Bolts are in and torqued. Get a little bit of this wiring out of the way so we can weld without overheating it. And then we'll clean up where we need to weld on the frame. First we'll have to, once we're done with that, we will have to get the rear bracket in place. We'll have to use our link here to set where the front one needs to go. All right, so our first step in setting up these shock mounts is, I think I told you I already opened this hole up because I didn't make it for this large of an axle. These are going to be plumb on the vertical here, and then we'll, but we got to bolt everything together first. So we're going to take our new tabs and the spacers that QA1 sent. So I like to get that washer in there as a spacer, and then QA1 sent some 1 1/4 inch spacers that represent the width of the shock. So we'll do 2 of this. Another washer for spacer, that spacer. The bracket we made, that fits real nice. And we can put the other shock mount bracket. It would help if I put it on the right way, huh? And then a washer. And they sent nylock nuts. QA1 sent nylock nuts for this. All right, so I just got some regular 3/8 nuts out of storage. Just because I don't want to use the nylocks for mock-up. They'll just be ruined after a couple of times, because we'll end up taking this apart probably a couple times getting everything set up, but at least for now we know it's all right. And then I went and tightened that, and we haven't put the other one in yet. Let's see. Whoops. So we can leave that loose for now. And then we want to get our shock mounted. And this is going to mount this way, so we want to use these holes. And again, so we're going to use a 1/2 inch bolt. And that's the shock size. Put a washer in there, so let's get this lined up. All right, so we have another washer in here next to this tubing as a spacer, and that's again because when we start welding on these main brackets, they're going to want to pull in and move around, and if we've got everything just the size we need it, then we end up running into a problem at the end when everything is squeezed together and you can't get the shock in there. Now, tighten all that up. And then tighten this one up a little more in a minute. But as you can see now, this will fit over it and figure out exactly where we need it to go. Put a level on. Right now we're just going to level this bracket. We don't really need, this is just acting as a spacer. So right now the shock can be out of the way, it's just acting as a spacer. And what we're going to do is want to find where that's going to be level, somewhere right in there. And then we need to get the distance from the frame that we need, and then we're close. We're about almost ready to tack in. Now, from what I measured on the other side, we're going to be right up against this other mount, this other lower mount towards the inside there. So we'll start with it roughly there, and then we'll get a pair of vice grips and clip that on. Getting close. Alright, so this one, and only this outside bracket, is in about the right spot. So I'm going to burn as a tack right here. It's easy to cut off if we need to. And then we've got to make sure that this is 90 degrees to the axle before we put another tack on it. So we're going to burn in a tack right here on the end. Double check ourselves for level, plumb. That's good. And we want to make sure we're 90 degrees here. So we need a square. Again. Now with this upper part tack welded on, we can see if how our shock clears. We got about 3/8 of an inch. Alright, so we have about 3/8 of an inch on the back side up here between that and the frame, and remember these are already a little larger than what we should need for spacing. When I put this vice grip on the bottom down here, it pulled that over just slightly, so when I release that we can pull this back. It only moved it about 1 degree, but enough that it moved it in just a hair. But I'm confident now that we can come in, clamp this from the bottom, get it squared up. Okay, so that's pulled in tight. We can check this, get it squared up. That's about 2 degrees off. Pull this over like that. Put one more tack on it. Check that. That's good enough. Pull that side in, make sure it's clamped on nice and tight. Alright, so those lowers are tacked in. Put our levels on here. So there's the shock plumb. And ever so slight pull this way, just not even a 1/16. Just a little pressure. So we want to measure from the center of this hole to the frame, and then we can draw up a clamp that will kind of come out, be round down, and then have a little leg that kicks down here, and then we'll make a backing for it just to stiffen it up. So let's get a ruler. All right, so knocked out some brackets, 1/2 inch hole, and I just cut the outside shape on the plasma table, and then I drill the hole. It's just a little easier, or a little, you don't end up with a hard spot. I've tried, and it works pretty well, to just mark the center of the hole with the plasma, then go back and drill it, but sometimes that hardens it pretty bad, and it can be a pain in the butt to try and drill it out. So you just got to play with it. So added a washer for spacing, put the clamp, or our bracket, and then 1/2 inch bolt, like I said. Tighten these up. And what we want to do is down here on our level, not that you're going to be able to see the bubble, but we want that to be perfectly plumb. There you go. And then we'll put a tack on the corners, on the inside corners here, and then because there's a little bit of shape to the top of this, we'll get a tack down here, a tack here, and then we'll hammer the top of this, these arms, and then put tacks on the back side there. So it doesn't take very much, just a little hit. Now I'm pretty confident that we could go ahead and weld this in, but it's always a good practice just to get everything tacked up and make sure that you're happy with the shape of everything before you start burning all the stuff in case you have to move something. And we still have a Watts link to install, and then we need to come up with a way to install our third link, and we kind of talked about this in a previous one. There's another mount similar to this cross member that goes across back here, and we're going to make a new one. So best that we get all those things in before we start welding all this stuff in solid. Now, kind of did against my own statement there in that I welded these front ones in, but like I said, I'm pretty confident we could weld all this in and be fine, but I do have a Watts link to put in back here, and I may find that I need to move something. So the cross member, you know, anything forward of the axle here, I'm fine with working permanent, essentially. So anyway, this is in, it's plumb 2 different directions. Happy with that shock mount. There's plenty of clearance in here for a spring to go up and down, and we'll have to rebend this brake line a little bit. I think the next piece of our puzzle is going to be to install a new differential cover that is has the integrated Watts link arm, I don't know what you call it, piece. So this is off of a Dodge Durango, I think in 07, 08, but I'll verify that, put it in the description or something. Anyway, this is a factory part. We ordered new. I think we got this one off of Amazon, but it's available everywhere. Part number is 521119748A, and then the arm is a separate part number, 905-206-089-23271D, as in Delta 1. And those are brand new Mopar pieces. I don't think they sell this bolt, so I think we had to find this bolt somewhere else or something. I can't remember. I also don't think the factory bolts, this is the bolt for the factory cover on the Dakota, and yeah, it's barely has one thread sticking out. So I'll go get through my supply back there and find us 4 or 5 bolts that we can use for now to get this thing mounted up, and then we'll get some, hopefully some flange head bolts like those. Also, my brother did a little digging in the junkyard and was able to get like the nuts for the arms on here for these studs. He just picked those up out of a junkyard, along with a couple other pieces that we're going to use for mock-up, and then we're going to see if we can use factory Durango parts versus having to make custom pieces for everything. We'll definitely have to make hangers for the frame side, but we're hoping to be able to use factory pieces everywhere else, so we'll see about that. But for now, let me go get some bolts. We'll take that I've had that cover loose for a while, draining out, so all I got to do is pull 1 or 2 bolts, pull that cover off, stick this cover in its place, and we're good to go there. So we're going to take this one off. Like I said, I've had that off loose for about a week, maybe even a little more than that, because I took it loose before I went on vacation, so it's been loose for a little while. All right, now let's see if we can put this in. Interesting. All right. So the Durango must have alignment pins here, which our differential is not drilled for. So we're going to take those out rather than try and drill out our differential. All right, and to it again. This is the first time I've tried this on here. And it appears that it's going to fit. No problems. Now these bolts are just a 5/16, so I just found one that was like 1.25 inches long or something. This was metric, but that's where this center bolt came from, that car that my brother took these nuts off of as well. So I'll have to find out what the torque needs to be on that, but it's tight enough for now. Right there. So with this piece vertical, we need to figure out how long an arm we need to go over here and where we could build a mount off of the frame on both sides. But it looks like it's going to be back here, which is going to work out really well and should not be interfering with any of our other components, as long as we don't need to go past the frame. Now, ideally, these are going to be at ride height. These are going to be level, going, one going one way, one going the other. They are slightly different lengths, so the distance, I should say, the distance from here to this frame rail and here to this frame rail are different, but we want the arms to be the same length. So one mount is going to be as far that way as we can get it, and one mount is going to come this way to make up the difference. So we'll probably put the lower mount on this side because we can come out underneath the frame a little bit, or directly under the frame, and then the top mount we can come in and we can be on the inside of the frame here somewhere. So just the way I'm thinking about it right now, I'll first look. But let's get the arms and see what we need to do. All right, now I have this bracket, or this link, vertical. This is slightly higher than it needs to be, and you can see the bolt hole over here is going to be just inside the frame rail. So no problem, we can make some tabs, and especially since it's a little higher than it needs to be, make some tabs that come down and swing out for that. Now the other arm, which is the same length, is very long. It comes out behind the shock on the other side. So looks like we may need to go ahead and modify these links. Now what I'm thinking is I can come in here, cut this, cut out, because it's very uniform, cut out however much we need to cut out, and then weld it back together, and then I'll plate it over the area that is too long, or that where I've cut it. I'll plate it just to make it a little bit stronger. And whatever I cut this one down to, I'll cut the other one down to make them exactly the same length. So by doing that, what happens is the lower side over here and this, as they move this way, they keep the axles centered straight up and down in the frame because they're the identical length. If one was longer than the other, then the axle would constantly be moving from one side to the other. So we had hoped that these arms would work essentially perfectly for what we're doing, but short of putting a bracket way out behind the coilover, which not the end of the world, but it would be long brackets hanging down, it would really not be the best solution. So we'll make some over here and we'll probably only need to take off maybe 4 or 5 inches. So we'll figure that out, and then we can at least just come straight down off the frame, or maybe on the outside of the frame, but not have to go out so far. Okay, so I cut 3 inches out, and this is my setup for welding it back together. just need to measure the holes here. Alright, so on the one I already taken this again. So on the one I've already done here, if we go from the edge of the bushing sleeve to the edge of the bushing sleeve, it's 14 3/8. In the same spot here, we can push this together. Me. We have it. Two new links, or two new pieces, same length. Stick them back on. The reason to run the drill back through there is just to make sure there's no little berries from when we were welding in there. So welded the inside enough and then got a good weld around the outside, and then I ground it flat so that there was a little bit more surface area for the bushing or the bolt, whichever side you're looking at, to sit against. So that's all good there. The only thing we need to do is chamfer the edges. So I'll get that bit and we'll get that done. Now that that's done, we can figure out exactly where this bar needs to be and how long this arm needs to be. It'll get welded onto the bottom of the frame. So we got to cut it off whatever length. And then we'll put some kind of gusset here, you know, probably a piece of tubing to make it, and then another piece going all the way across the frame to the other side, since the load is left to right, you know, side to side rather than front to back. Just do a small one here, and then a nice long gusset all the way across. Figured out the approximate location here of where this post needs to be. So just marking it. We'll have to move it out of the way long enough to grind the paint off the frame. And kind of what you're checking is making sure the Watts link center arm over here off the differential is vertical. And make sure this bar is horizontal. And then using this as the center, and I've got it everything tightened up so that this is not wanting to move front to back. Then get this bar set. It's kind of a process. Put this arm back in. Check it. Now we're going to let all this cool, and then if we have to, we can, you know, tap it with a hammer one way or the other to get it squared up again. Then we'll put our gussets in, and then once, you know, before we final weld those gussets, we'll check this bar one more time to make sure it's plumb, and then we're also going to be putting some steel on the back side of the frame. You see it on the other side better. We're putting a little bit of plating in here to box this in, especially on this side, because we don't want this being able to pull up and actually bend the bottom flange of the frame. And then our gusset is going to be going across here somewhere and getting into this other frame rail, so, or you know, maybe coming back at an angle. I don't know. We've got to do something to triangulate that because it's so long. But for now, looks like everything's good. Here's what I came up with. Piece of 1-inch tubing. It's got about a 40-ish degree bend in it. And there's a rivet right here, so I had to cut one end off. But just make sure you put arrows on whichever way you're bending, or which way you intend for this thing to go in, and you should be able to get my big fat head in your way. So just put arrows on your tubing so you know which end was up, but you know, so as you're working on your notches. And it took me 5, 6, 8 times back and forth between the saw and here, and then the grinder just to clean it up a little bit. So that'll go in like that, and it just short of this rivet, so it'll end up getting welded to that rivet, but that's fine. So I need to clean up the paint on the bottom side here, and then we can tack this piece in, and then that'll probably be it for today. Alright, well, that takes care of that. Still nice and plumb. So we'll let that all cool again, and then once we get the other, you know, get this lined up, get the other bracket built for the other side, then we'll come back, we'll come in and brace the arm here towards the other side. Now I don't know if we're going to be able to go all the way to the other side because we may run into the Watts link, or if we're going to come off at an angle and catch like we may put a cross member here or something like that. Just whatever we need just to make this strong. So That's it for now. See you later. If you want maybe a cheat, you could clean off a little of the paint on that cross, on the original cross member, and then write it right there. Tack weld, like put a tack here and a tack here, and then as you hammer it, you've got that as rigid. Keep bringing it around.
Instead of this. All right.
Well, I mean that may work fine too, but if you're finding that it's moving, throw a couple tack welds on there and
It won't move.
It won't move, right?
Tack weld.
Yeah?
Yep.
I don't have enough wire to feed.
I don't know if that'll hold a goddamn thing. Jesus. Nobody look at that.
Hey, that's why you're practicing with tacks where it doesn't matter right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's open.
What's that? It's not even home?
I don't think so. Yeah, it's open. Okay.
It probably will break if we pound on it very much. But.
There are bigger hammers and rubber hammers and all kinds of stuff if you need them.
Okay, let's back off. Let's get you and then we'll tack.
Yeah, almost.
Back off.
Yeah, out there. Back off a little. Way too close.
So, what were we doing wrong that laying it
Hey,
this way is the way to
You
do
grabbed
it?
this
I
pipe
know,
and
I
started
grabbed
beating
that
the crap
piece
out
of
of
pipe and hit the pipe on here so that I could flex it without having to put the dents in it.
Ah, I see.
Those dents are going to be hidden behind a gas tank. You're never going to see them. It's no big deal. But that's what I was using this, and then I was hitting it with a little more hammer.
Now,
Force
we're
it.
bringing this across to here too?
No, I was just hitting this piece.
Just on that piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get it.
And then he would, sometimes I'd have him overflex it, to get more of a bend somewhere. But we just started what you did. We started putting tacks in. And then once we had it down here, then I was starting to come back up with a row. It
See,
looked
but
like,
you actually put a tack in.
yeah. I was burning the hell out of some tacks.
Now, why did you do this?
Because we're done. We can start welding that up. That one's done.
Okay, and how do you weld that?
You just once you get all the way through them a few times, then you can start running down through the grooves.
And is that one string?
No, it's a whole bunch of tacks. And you probably want to use that other weld. Because this has got that 35 wire, so you got to turn it up fairly hot.
Oh.
Whereas that's got 22 wire. So you can turn it down a little bit, still get plenty of heat in it, and move a little faster. You don't have to have so much heat in it.
But do we want, at this point, do we want to get some of this done, or do we want
Yeah, I
to
would get
to
at
that
least some
side?
of this done
Okay.
so that this stays in place, stays in shape. And you know, you can start out here on the corners and weld up the corners and then run a couple beads through the middle, just so you know that thing's never going to move. And then you can go back and work on this end, because what we'll end up doing is it'll pull in like this as we weld it. So we'll end up either having to cut some of our welds to open it back up, or we'll end up putting a hydraulic jack in here and jacking it back apart. Because it won't matter how much cooling you let happen, all this welding is going to suck that arm in.
From right now it will?
Yeah, if I welded all the way through there 3 times,
Yeah.
we'd cut that loose and this thing go boing.
Okay. But that's not a big deal, right?
No, it's you just plan for it. You know it's going to happen, so you just work it out.
All right, so let's use the other welder then.
Yeah,
Is it easier to drag it over or take over that?
I would drag that over. All right, guys, it's a couple days later. I'm finally getting around to doing this walk around. Jeremy and Caleb had already made it home. And what you can see is we've got the third link in here. Got some brackets. I haven't welded them in yet, but we'll get those welded in, cap one side of it, and then probably kind of come back off of here, put a little brace on it, a little piece of tubing there, and then off of either the frame or off of this as well. Well, actually, that may be all we need, is just one to come down and brace the center of that onto the... We need to brace it anyway, just to make that a little bit stronger. So we got the lower link in, passenger side, comes back. Got room for our shock. So we've got our Watts link all set up in here now. That looks really sharp, fits, and those are factory parts, minus I had to cut about 3 inches out of the Durango crosslink there. But the bushings are also replaceable, so worst case, you buy another set of links, push the bushings out, push the new ones in. Nobody that we found so far sells the bushings separate. But you can see we got quite a bit done. So one more thing we still need to make is a brace over here to this piece of square tubing that holds the Watts link in place. That'll most likely just come off this piece of tubing and over there, just to make that a little bit stronger. Like I said, something off of here over to hold that, to make that a little bit stronger. And then really the rear is done. We've got our shock measurements, so won't be very long. We'll go ahead and get our rear shocks ordered. Hey, well, finally got some time to work on this Dakota again, and it's been a few days. I think I mentioned last time my brother and his son have long been gone already. But I got all of the extra support tubes in and bracing and everything welded. I still need to weld up the thread bung ends of the control links, but that can come later. I also need to paint the rest of the lower parts of the brackets, everything where it bolts on. But for this video, rear suspension, I just wanted to try and finish it up enough that we could cycle through its motion and see how it works. So I'm gonna do a view here, and then I'll probably put the camera up over the top and we'll look at it that way. It's got lots of articulation. Granted, there are no shocks on it, but we can see how it moves through everything. This would be another, you know, a lot of people do a 3-link for the front end of their rock crawlers and stuff, but it's a lot of work. But it is a fairly simple system. You've got the lower bars, you start out with them parallel to the ground, put a little bit of adjustability in your design so that you can tweak that. And then your upper bar parallel to your lower bar. Everything works in conjunction. You saw I had the axle welded to the frame. That was to set it in place. We did that with the leaf springs in place. So you have the leaf springs, got the ride height we wanted, welded a bar in there. That's it. The axle can't move. The only thing you got to do from there is also try and get the pinion angle to where you want it. Let's cycle it through. It's hot today. It's in the mid to high 90s. And we have had one rainstorm after another. So for us, it's extremely humid. If you live in South Texas or Florida, yeah, we're not humid at all. But for us, it's pretty rough here. But let's get this thing cycled through and you can see it. There's ride height, probably real close. Yeah. So that's about ride height. We can go all the way up. I've added some bump stops under the frame rails. My brother got those sent out. I got them just a couple days ago. There you go. So that's tied up against the bump stops. And then let's see, we'll go down about that far below. Go a little further. Yeah, it's a little further than the axle will actually move with the shocks in place, but you can see it's sitting on just my floor jack, but there's all kinds of articulation and there's zero movement left to right, which is what we want. We want zero movement left to right, and we want this thing to be able to move over the bumps or around a corner and keep the axle square to the ground so that the truck will stay planted in a corner. Again, so that's all the way down, and then coming all the way up, and you can see how this watch link just keeps that axle centered. And our pinion angle hasn't moved at all. It's all the way up through its range. Our pinion angle is dead set, and that's done by that 3rd link bar, that upper bar. So, back down. And then we'll try and get one more view here. Let's get another view of it transitioning. This is what it'd be like if it was hitting bumps. Solid all the way. That's pretty much all the way down. Well, that's about it for the rear suspension on our 2002 Dodge Dakota. We have a 3-link suspension with a Watts link included or added on, and then coilover shocks. So that'll give us our ride height adjustability and all of that. Next up, it's time to put the fuel tank back in, put the bed back on, come up with some sort of exhaust that'll probably poke out right here behind the door on the passenger side. But came out really awesome. I had a lot of fun working with my brother and my nephew. It's been many years since my brother and I were able to work on a project together. We did it all the time when we were in our early 20s, maybe late teens. And I'm just enough older than him that by the time he was getting around to driving, I was already headed off to college. And it was after I came back from college, but before I went on to flight school and got married and had my own kids, that we've actually been able to work on a project together. Years and years ago, we used to race motorcycles, and so I would, get to interact with him during that. But still, didn't really have any projects that we got to work on together. And of course, Caleb comes out, and he's just a fun guy to hang around, and he's starting to really pick up on ways to do things, and his welding is improving, and we're chasing all those skills down. So it's been a lot of fun. But anyway, thanks for watching. Next up will be A-arms for the front. So next up will be control arms for the front suspension. We'll get those laid out with using the stock ones. We'll lay out some designs on the table. Probably make the uppers just an 1/8 of an inch, probably a little more than that, probably 1/4 of an inch longer, so that we can get a little more camber adjustment in there. And then we're going to look at whether we want to adjust the ball joint position for any additional caster. We're not going so low that that's probably a real big deal on this truck, but it's something to at least consider as we're designing and building our control arms. Lowers will just basically be the identical shape of the original control arm, but without the bucket for the coil spring and a big open area, so that we can get our coilover shock and spring in there. So that's all coming in the next episode. So I'll see you then. Again, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all the other YouTube stuff. We'll see you again real soon.